So very quickly, we've moved through the three different dose cohorts we evaluated. We found the RP2D. It's a 3+3 design, which means based on the data from three patients, you add three more at the same exact dose. We did that. We've confirmed the RP2D. We've opened an expansion cohort. By the end of the year, we hope to have about 20-ish patients overall, the vast majority of them at the RP2D to really give us an idea of the clinical responses and the safety in this sort of a patient population. So I think this is an exciting year for us.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for another Virtual Investor What This Means segment. My name is Janine Thomas. I am CEO of JTCIR, and I will be the moderator. Today, we are featuring Senti Biosciences, and I am very pleased to be joined by Dr. Kanya Rajangam. She is President, Head of Research and Development, and Chief Medical Officer of Senti Bio. We're so happy to have you back on, Kanya.
Thank you, Janine. Happy to be back on with you, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I just want to remind our audience that Senti Bio is publicly listed on NASDAQ and trades under the ticker SNTI. And during today's discussion, the company will be making forward-looking statements, and I encourage you to view the company's website at sentibio.com for the latest SEC filings and information. Okay, Kanya, we are going to dive right in. So, you recently announced that you've selected the recommended phase 2 dose for your Senti 202 program for the treatment of AML. Can you provide an overview of the study and how you determined the recommended phase 2 dose?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Janine. So, the recommended phase 2 dose and determining that is an important milestone. In fact, it's the primary objective of a phase 1 trial. So, what that means is that we started our trial and we said we would look at a couple different dose levels and also dose regimens, which means in what schedule Senti 202 is given. So, so determining the recommended phase 2 dose essentially means we have now declared a dose and a regimen that we intend to add more patients on and use in our in our next phase trials, both expansion cohort and if the data continues to support it for further pivotal development. So the way the study is designed was when we started our Senti-202 clinical trial, we knew we were starting with an active dose. We knew that based on relevant clinical data from other trials, as well as from our own preclinical data for Senti-202. So we had planned to evaluate two dose levels and two different dose schedules. And what we did was when we looked at the totality of data, we found that there were no safety events which are known as dose limiting toxicities. At the same time, we also saw efficacy right from our very first dose cohort. So we picked our recommended phase 2 dose based on the totality of safety and efficacy, safety being clean, efficacy being seen in all of our dose cohorts, and our PK, the exposure, as well as some pharmacodynamic data. The final factor we took into consideration is patient convenience. So we went with the schedule wherein we give Senti-202 once a week as opposed to twice a week, which is a little bit more patient friendly. So those are the factors we used to pick our go forward or recommended phase 2 dose or RP2D.
Well, so, Kanye, you started to answer part of this, but I want to really dig in deeper here. What does this mean for your overall Senti 202 development program?
Yeah, this is a key milestone. So, in general, when you run a clinical trial, the very first step is to find your recommended phase 2 dose because then you're saying essentially, I've looked at a few different doses and schedules in our case, and this is the dose and schedule we feel is optimum in terms of benefit risk for patients. So, what that means now is going forward, it's a question of adding more patients at the same dose and schedule. We've opened what we call an expansion cohort, which also is disease specific. So, we've opened a relapsed refractory AML patient expansion cohort. And the intention is to enroll additional patients at this RP2D and then get a read with greater patient numbers of efficacy and overall safety. So this is a key milestone that we've passed because we are no longer exploring doses and regimens. We are confident in our RP2D. So now it's a question of increasing the numbers of the denominators, so to speak, by adding on more patients to see what the effect is with greater numbers.
Excellent. And so, speaking of greater numbers, what are the next steps and why should investors pay attention to your Senti 202 clinical development program and, importantly, to Senti Bio?
Yeah, so this is an exciting year for us. We have been in the clinic for about a year and a half, if I'm doing the math right. And very quickly for us, at our first dose cohort, we saw responses, right? So very quickly, we've moved through the three different dose cohorts we evaluated. We found the RP2D. It's a 3+3 design, which means based on the data from three patients, you add three more at the same exact dose. We did that. We've confirmed the RP2D. We've opened an expansion cohort. By the end of the year, we hope to have about 20-ish patients overall, the vast majority of them at the RP2D to really give us an idea of the clinical responses and the safety in this sort of a patient population. So I think this is an exciting year for us, and we are really looking forward to adding more patients at the RP2D and hopefully continue to see the really cool results we've seen so far. Just as a quick reminder, our trial is being run in patients with relapsed refractory AML and other similar malignancies, very poor prognosis. The average patients who come on our trial, literature tells us their median survival, unfortunately, is about 4, 5, 6 months. So the fact that we now have patients who are 8+ months out with durability after they've achieved a response is very meaningful for that individual patient, certainly. And we hope that as we add more patients, that this can be translated on a broader population basis. So it's a very exciting time for us because we've got our dose, we've got our schedule, we've got great promising efficacy from our initial 9 patients that we presented publicly. So now it's a question of more of the same, and we hope to continue to see this sort of a benefit that we've seen in for our first few patients.
Congratulations on all this progress.
Thank you.
I think you also received orphan drug designation as well, haven't you?
That's right. That's right. So we applied for orphan drug designation, and so that's a separate office. And what they do is they look to see is there a medically plausible basis, if I remember the exact terminology correct, that this product could have. There's a medically plausible basis to believe that this could benefit the patients we are studying, right? So that's the bar, regulatory bar to get orphan drug designation. So we view that as another independent validation of our excitement because now we had a whole other group at the FDA take a look at the data we sent them, and they believe that it was sufficient to give us that orphan drug designation. What orphan drug designation means, though, is it's awarded to products which are being evaluated in what is called an orphan disease. That is, diseases that occur in less than a certain number of Americans every year. Or rare diseases. So the idea really is to make sure that companies such as ours can go and evaluate therapies that may be helpful for patients with these rare diseases with terrible outcomes, like I just mentioned for AML.
Excellent. Well, you've already had an action packed 2025, and it sounds like there's more data to come this year. So, we definitely want to have you back, Kanya. Congratulations on all of your progress so far. And this does conclude our virtual investor What This Means segment. If you like what you saw today, I encourage you to visit sentibio.com for more information on the company and to sign up to follow the company to receive their alerts, as well as follow their social channels on X, LinkedIn to stay current on the information. And as a reminder, Senti trades on NASDAQ under the ticker SNTI. Kanya, thanks so much for coming back on, explaining what this all means. Exciting times ahead for Senti Bio. And I'd like to thank our audience for your viewership. And I wish everyone a great rest of your day.